and thank you for tuning in to episode 5 of the Creative Minute. I'm very excited to introduce today's episode with Olivia Biffot, a French-Gabonese actress and screenwriter based in Los Angeles. I met Olivia a few years ago during a long weekend on the West Coast with friends, and I was struck by her humor and bright personality, but also her frankness, which I couldn't help but admire. I've been following her work ever since, and it's without surprise that I saw her grow and thrive as a stand-up comedian, actress, and now screenwriter. In June of 2020, at the height of the Black Lives Matter protests spreading in America, she published a simple video explaining her experience of racism in the many countries that she's lived in, but especially in France. It quickly became viral in a way that she didn't expect, and I honestly wish everybody would watch this video. I will link it in the show notes for this episode. She tells us more about leaving behind her degree in politics to embrace acting, the transition to being a writer, and what creativity means to her. We touched on many topics that we were both passionate about, from the portrayal of female characters in movies and TV to the vulnerability of putting your work out there for the world to see. As you'll see, we had a very nice chat recording this, and I hope you like it. Now let's get into the show. Hello, and thank you so much for joining me. Don't you start with just introducing yourself and telling us what you do?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Olivia Biffot. I'm an actress and screenwriter. I'm based in Los Angeles. I'm half French, half Gabonese, so I have kind of an international background.
Cool. And before we get more into that, I wanted to know, I think you graduated from a master's degree in governance and public policy, if I remember well, in the UK. And then you became a comedian, then an actor, then a screenwriter. So just walk us through your path and what each step in your career taught you.
I actually was never interested in the arts. It's also because of my upbringing, because my parents were more about academic achievements of getting a master's degree and doing politics or being a doctor or being a lawyer. But being an actress for me, people who were actors, it was their hobbies or never a real, job. And after I graduated from my master's, I started going on job interviews. And there's a saying for me that really embodies my experience. It's be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. Because what I had always wished for was to get my master's degree with distinction and apply to the biggest lobbying firms and public affairs firms in the UK. And I was there, and I kind of had a moment in one of those firms where I was looking around and I was not excited at all. I was like, it was more of like, what are you doing here? I was in the waiting room waiting for them to interview me, like really talented people that the old Olivia would have loved. And I was like, what the hell am I doing here? And I started asking myself, what do I want to do for a living? Like, not in terms of social achievement or like making my parents proud, but what do I want? And at the same time, I had a friend who worked in a production company, and he told me about, there's this show in France called Le Grand Journal, which is kind of like Jimmy Fallon, and they had this weather girl on the show. And I remember at the time he was talking about they're looking for the one for the next season. I was just joking around. It was like 2 a.m. I was drunk, and I was like, I could do this. And I was also like professionally completely lost. I hadn't told my parents I didn't want to go into politics. And I was like, what kind of job is this? He's just reading out of a screen. I could do it. And he was like, well, actually, you have an interesting profile. You could do it. And I was like, hell yeah. And so he emailed the casting director, and I went on an audition, like for the first time in my life. And I remember when, I actually got the email for the audition, I was like, fuck, what did I do? I started stressing around. I emailed the girl back and I was like, so what do I need to learn? And, like the A student in me went like, I need maybe to like open books and learn things and read articles. And she said, no, just come as you are with a pair of blue jeans and a white t-shirt. And I was like, come as I am? I don't think I've never done this. I always like kind of pretended in the corporate world. I wouldn't be so, laugh so loudly like I do in the, my real life and stuff. So that was like the real turning point. This audition was just improv. And I walked out the audition thinking I want to do an acting class. And that's how it started.
Wow, that's really, really impressive. And I didn't know that it started so cold turkey, but I've watched a few of your reels on of you being a comedian on stage, and it's so impressive. So you then got into classes. Was that parallel to your dead job, I guess?
Oh no. So what I did is I completely stopped and I thought I'm going to take a year off, do acting classes, see if I like it because I was like, I think I don't know what it really is to be an actor. So I'm going to do the acting classes, try to make me like, work on a set or something, see how it is because I obviously don't know how it is. And the thing is, after 8 months, I landed two roles, like second lead roles in two different feature films. So that was really crazy for me. And what was also awesome is that because I'm not from this industry, my parents don't care, and I had zero pressure. So I would go into auditions, be like, hey, hi, I just need to read a text. But I would have never gone into a job interview at a public affair firms with being so chilled. I would go and be like, okay, learn this, you need to be good, you need blah, 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 blah. And then I would go into auditions like, hi, learn the text, blah, 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 ha, 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 and I would go out and be like, yeah, that was easy. I just read something from a paper, you
Is
know?
that an advice that you would give to younger comedians and actors to maybe lower the stakes, if that's been
Yeah,
possible?
yeah, definitely. Like, you have no clue what they're looking for. So stop trying to create a character or protagonist that is this way or this way because you don't really know. Even like I think you just need confidence in your judgment of the script and the character, and that's it. But the rest, I mean, I think there's a lot of bullshit in terms of what it means to be like how to be an actor, especially in terms of the audition, because the audition lasts like 10 minutes. It's not
Yeah.
like landing a role where then you need to do the work and know everything about it, but an audition, it's 10 minutes. Just be your best and that's it. That's my
Yeah.
advice.
Wow. And before we go into why you then transitioned to screenwriting, I know that you moved from France to LA when you were an actor. So why did you decide to do that?
Opportunities. Like the interesting thing is that when I have a bachelor's degree in communication and marketing. So when I started acting, I came in with the mindset of a marketer and communicator. I did a benchmark of all the actresses in France who were mixed race or black, looked at everything that they achieved, the roles they were getting, the agents they had, and the acting school they went to. Because I was like, oh, they are my competition. So how do I stand out from them, etc. And that's when I realized that there were like very few actresses. The actresses who were out there were often girls who had accomplished things before, like they were models. So it wasn't like, oh, they come from nothing like me. It was they already had some kind of popularity in another field, or singers, models,
Mm.
and they were casted for roles. And I was like, I feel like it's going to be very difficult for me. And even looking on the TV and movies that were coming out, I was like, I don't think there's an opportunity for me. I feel like the movie industry in France is I'd say a bit racist. It's the reality. Like the roles that are out there are very, very narrow minded. And what was the moment I made my final decision was after I did my two feature films, I did the red carpets and I was like, I'm going to aim for a huge agent. And so I did, and I signed with this agent. And the first thing she told me during our interview, she was like, just so you know, you're gonna get like way less opportunities than a white actress because the producers, the screenwriters, and directors in France, what was the term she said they're uh oh yeah, they said they're not creative enough to put a person of color in a role, let's say, of a student who's studying law. She was
Mm.
like, they need an explanation if they need an explanation within the script to have a protagonist who's a girl of color. So, oh, she's an immigrant, or she's a prostitute, or she's this or that, but she cannot be neutral. Like, oh no,
Mm.
it's just Sophie, who's a law student at the Sorbonne. Like, they wouldn't see me as this because of my color. They would need an explanation. So when she told me this, I was like, okay. And she was like, but I'm going to push it because we're such a big agency, we get all the scripts. And when I see a script and they're like, well, it's a Sophie who's studying law at the Sorbonne, I'll be like, I have Olivia, she's great, you can, but she told me how what are the rules of the game in the movie industry in France. So I did a year with her, and it was just really depressing for me not getting any audition. And I was like, well, I'm bilingual, why would I stay in France? And so that's why when I was like, I need to aim bigger, go to the UK where they have like way more roles for people of color, and then head to the States.
Wow. And
Yeah.
did you get an agent once you were in the States? Did you notice a difference in the roles?
Yeah, so what I love about the States, I have an approach of this industry that's very cynical, because it's a lot of marketing, and even the whole movement of having diversity in their movies, I know that it's more of a PR move, political move, because they're feeling pressured. And it's not a genuine artistic of like, oh, we want more stories from people of color, or we need more diversity. It's more of like, well, everyone hates us because there's not enough diversity. The Oscars goes to like Oscar so wide, and we're trying to showcase an industry that's so beautiful and inclusive, and it turns into the Oscar so white. So I have an understanding of that. So when I came here, I could see how people were more interested in me than they would have been than they were in France, because I'm a person of color, I'm mixed, and they're like, oh, this is interesting, now this is what people are looking for, so it was still hard for me to get an agent and a manager. But when I got one, and the castings I got were castings that I had never gotten in France, like never. And I actually got a casting, to talk about the discussion I had with the French agent. I got a casting last year that was for a girl who goes to Harvard Law School. And I was like, and I went to the audition room, and in the audition room, it was like me, a blonde, a brunette, a girl with like very dark hair. Like, we were all so different. And I was like so happy to be sitting there and be like, wow, well, I'm competing with a girl who's blonde. So it's not just about my complexion, it's about, am I talented enough to embody this role?
Yeah, finally they start practicing what they preach, I guess. But like
Exactly.
you said,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
is a little bit of calculating in that
Oh, it's
sometimes, I
all
guess.
business. It's called show business. I totally understand this.
Mm.
And this is how I remained mentally healthy, I'd say, in this industry. Because if you go in there thinking, oh, it's just going to be my passion, and people are going to see my story, and they're going to love it, and they're going to want to put like millions of dollars into it. And this isn't how it works. Everyone has an agenda, and it's more of like, do you understand that? And how do you fit in there and try to make your story, you know, you bring them to life?
Hmm. And is that, when did you decide to go more into screenwriting? Was that more of an opportunity or a conscious decision?
So it's funny, because when I read your question, it was like, let me try to think about this, because the truth is, when I started acting, I started writing at the same time. The first thing I ever wrote was just a little thing with my best friends, and I actually filmed it. It was like, the quality shitty, but I still have it on YouTube, like on private. But I actually wrote a pilot of a web series with my friends about girls living like together in the same apartment in Paris, and I actually pitched it to a production company. The same year I started becoming an actress, and then I got the roles in the features, and I went into acting. And then when I moved to LA, I had a son, and that was the moment where I couldn't act anymore. For first of all, the manager I had in LA dropped me, and I know, again, I'm cynical. I understand everyone has an agenda, and if he sees me and you see me right now and you're like, oh, I want her, I want to cast her, and you're like, well, what does she look with a baby? And it's not the same character. So he was like, he literally dropped me, which was like really tough for me, like at the beginning of the pregnancy. And so I started writing because I was like, I can't act because I'm pregnant. So I really, really like went into the whole writing process. I wrote a whole web series about my experience of being pregnant as a millennial mom, and the pressure of like Instagram moms who are like so fucking perfect and fit and beautiful and dressing in white with their babies. And I was like, there's so much material for comedy that I wrote it. And I guess that's when I make the big turn because, um, as actors, we're not in full control of our careers. There's like so many decision makers on top of us. It's a producer, it's a director, it's a casting director. So before you land a role, there's like three people, even more, because usually like more than an executive, big execs in like big networks. So many people get to decide if you land a role. So when you're a screenwriter, your creativity and your practice of your creativity is, you don't need anyone. You just need a computer or a sheet of paper and a pen, and it just goes. And I felt way more fulfilled when I was writing than when I was, as a screenwriter than as an actress, because for me, going on audition is not being an actress. It's just I go on audition. I act if I'm on a set and I play a role, but otherwise it's very frustrating.
Yeah, it must be. Do you have do you have experiences as an actress that you really found fulfilling though?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, any experience I have on set is extremely fulfilling. It's like awesome. But you don't get to be on set that often when you're an actor. And I mean, when you're not famous or when you don't have all those opportunities. And the fact that I left France, this was like, I guess the toughest part is that when I was in France and I was signed with this big agent, I had some kind of like notoriety that opened doors easily for me. Like my agent was really big, so it was just opening doors easily. And then I came to France, to LA, and no one knew what I did. Like people didn't know the two features I like played in. They didn't know anything. So it felt like starting from scratch. And yeah, it was way tougher to get auditions. So sometimes I was just like, my practice of being an actress was in class. Acting classes were where I practiced, but I had this frustration of like, I want to be on set. I want to like, play a character because this is why I'm doing this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, which I understand why you find writing much more fulfilling. And I wanted to ask about your poetry. You recently started sharing your poems on Instagram, which are beautiful. I'm sure you write so much more that we don't get to see, but how did you, what inspires you to write? How did you get into it?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for saying it's beautiful, because it was really hard for me to share it. I actually had an anonymous Instagram account with my poetry because I was so scared, which is a problem with artists, I guess. We create so much and then we're like, should I show it? Are people going to judge me?
Mm.
So what's interesting about poetry for me is that, and also why it was hard for me to share, it's like, it's not something I've practiced at all. It's not something I nurture. It's more of something that comes to me. And I actually wrote a poem about it that says, the first lines are, I hear them clear in the morning, whispers gently downloading, letters, wise thoughts on top of me, braiding words, rhymes, poetry. And for me, it's more of like, I honestly feel like I hear rhymes in my head, and then I'm like, oh, maybe I should sit down and see where it goes. And then I sit down and I see where it goes. And I also have this weird thing about the musicality of the rhymes. It's always 8 syllables. I don't even know how you call. I Googled it once and I forgot. The 8 syllables rhymes. I mean, I feel like it would be a bit insulting to say that I'm a poet because I don't know those things of like, oh, this is how it works and those are the rules of poetry. And I'm like, I'm already into the rules of screenwriting. Poetry for me is just like, oh, I just like saw this picture and I kind of heard a rhyme in my head. Maybe I'm going to sit down and write it down and share it with whoever likes it. So yeah, I love my relationship with poetry because there is no pressure, no stress. If it comes, it comes. I'll sit down and write it down. If it doesn't come, it's okay, you know.
Yeah, that's definitely the most satisfying creative outlets, when you don't need to have a finished product or someone to really appreciate it for it to be satisfying. That's incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, I was going to ask, where do you think your creativity in general comes from? Because you said that you didn't really grow up being into arts.
For boredom. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's like I precisely remember moments of my childhood where I was so bored. I was just like, I'm gonna write stuff, or I'm gonna imagine things, or I have it's just boredom. It's just that for me. I mean, and again, I don't know, was I born already creative and I think it's boredom and so this is my explanation for it? I have no clue. But the truth is, my I have a very, very creative mind, which is also problematic for me because it never stops. I'm always like, it's like always different ideas that, oh, maybe I should write this. Oh, maybe I should write that. And then I'm like, oh, please focus, finish the project, and then try the tens of thousands of other projects that you have in your head. So I have a book with all my, I should write this. I also have to write like so many novels. You wouldn't even
No way. I would love to read them.
I started a novel like 4 years ago and it's still in my computer. And I'm like, I need to finish my novel. And then I'm like, no, you actually have a screenplay you need to finish first. Because this is your job. You're a screenwriter. You're not a novelist. So that's, yeah, my creativity, it's all from my head. I don't need to nurture it. There's nothing I need to do, honestly. And the biggest problem I have is like stopping the creative mind because it never stops, and that's why I meditate.
Wow. And does it come naturally in English to write? Because you told me your first language is French. So
Yeah, I think, and I've always thought about it. For me, for instance, it was always easier to say I love you in English than in French. And I think it's because it's not my first language. So I know how to express it without putting on it the pressure of the emotional baggage of the word saying je t'aime. For me, je t'aime is way harder to say that I love you. It means the same thing, but it's not the same. I mean, it's just emotionally for me. I feel a weight when I say je t'aime that I don't feel when I say I love you. And so it's way easier for me to write in English because then I can put emotions that I would be ashamed of in French. And in English, it's just like, oh, the emotions away because I don't know. I just don't know. But so it's way easier. For poetry, I would never be able to write poetry in French. It never comes to me in French.
it's so interesting that you say that, because it's something that I've noticed too. A lot of what I do, I would not be able to do it in French because I think speaking in a different language than the one that you really feel connected with, it feels less vulnerable, and you
Yes,
can talk about things with some sort of detachment.
exactly. Yeah.
It's real. Oh, I'm
That's
I'm so lucky
funny.
I found someone who has that.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's so true. It's exactly this. There's a detachment. The feelings are still here, but there's a detachment with it.
yeah.
Exactly the same.
I
Yeah.
guess we're lucky to have, that extra tool to express ourselves
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
you also mentioned when we talked earlier that you thought that going away for a long project like you recently did felt worth it for your career. So it made me wonder, what do you think your ultimate goal with your career is, and what do you think success would be to you?
Um. So first, the ultimate goal for my career. That's a great question because um, at the beginning of the year, I took the decision to stop acting. It was like it's not a it wasn't a decision of oh, I'm frustrated or blah blah blah. It was more of like this is who I am now, and this is who I was when I decided acting, and I'm not the same person anymore, and I have different needs, and I've discovered another area of where I can practice my creativity that is so fulfilling that this is what I want to do. And again, to the be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. I landed a role at the beginning of the year. I can't say anything about it, but I was like, oh, maybe I should try it because I like the character. I think it's really interesting, and so I went to film it. And what was your question about? I was like, I'm so lost into, because I'm like, don't say anything about the project. There's a voice like, don't say anything about the project. Don't say anything. It's secret. It's secret. Like,
No, I was just asking. It's okay, and if you slip, I can still get it. I was wondering what you think success is, but sometimes people don't have an answer.
oh yeah, so that was the second question. For me, success is being happy and in peace with yourself. I think it's the both of that. So yeah, I used to think that success was professional achievements, and I don't think so anymore. For me, it's just being happy and in peace with yourself and who you are as a person, uh, the good, the bad, the ugly, because I think we also tend to try to be perfect, which means nothing. For me, perfection is being, we're all humans with flaws. So I think this is what success is for me. It's just this peace of mind and constantly trying to better yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's for me, it's not, success isn't professional.
Mhm.
I think that if you're successful as a human being, you will be successful professionally. I'm convinced, if you're aligned, you know.
That's very wise. You seem to be very in touch with your mind. You're one of the first people who taught me about meditation. Do you have a regular practice of that?
So I don't have a regular practice. Uh I try to. So sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. And it's one of my 2021 resolutions, like at least once a day. I used to do twice a day, but at least once a day, it's like a minimum. Yeah, meditation for me is so important, especially because I told you about my mind that's just constantly, rolling. It's just a moment of peace, of no thoughts, no judgments, and I've definitely seen how it has impacted my character and my creativity also.
I'm sure. Well, on another topic, but I wanted to know, you grew up between Gabon and France, I believe, and in general, what do you think your multicultural upbringing brought you in terms of positives?
So I actually grew up, because my father's a diplomat. I was lucky enough to grow up in the UK, South Korea, and South Africa, and Gabon and France. So this what's interesting for me is that people often ask me, like, what was it like? But for me, it's normal. So it's always difficult. I, for instance, have always been amazed and jealous of people who are like, this is the house I grew up in my whole life, and this is my friend that I met in kindergarten. And I'm like, you have a friend that you've been friends since you were like 3? This is wow. For me, I'm so jealous of those people, and they grew up, and then they get married, and the friend is the maid of honor, and I'm like, what? This is insane. So for me, it was always normal, the multicultural experience. How I grew up was that the fact that you arrive in a country that's not your own, you and it's also how my parents educated me, you're not allowed to judge the country and the culture because it's not yours. You can't go into a country as an expat and be like, oh, I don't like this, I don't like the food, I don't know. It's like, you're invited here. It's not, you're not going to change the rules because it's not your country. So I always came in those country with a very curious mindset, trying to understand, oh, this is why they do this is why they do that, etc., etc. So this is my approach on anything. It has completely shifted my approach on even my relationship with people. When I meet people, I'm always like, what are their background? I love talking with people who have like completely different mindsets from mine. And it's interesting because sometimes when I ask them like tricky questions, they think it's because I'm going to judge them. And I'm like, no, I'm very serious. Like, can you tell me why you're against abortion? I'm not going to judge you. I'm very sincerely curious of what is your logic behind it. We're all different. I'm not judging you, but it's something that it's not in my mindset. So I'm trying to understand what's in yours, and it's the approach I have with everything. That's also, I think, a great quality for a screenwriter and an actor, because as actors, we're taught that an actor is not allowed to judge a character. So an actor who plays a Nazi general is not allowed to judge the Nazi general. He needs to understand what happened to this person and why this person became so terrible. Just like a lawyer, even if you play a rapist, you're not allowed to judge the rapist. You need to explain, you need to understand however you want to, but you need to understand why this person became like this, and you're not allowed to judge. And I think this is a quality I got from growing up in those different countries, not judging and going from I want to understand how you think, and that's it.
Wow. Yeah, I've never thought of this from that perspective, but indeed, it must be a real asset when you're building a character as a screenwriter and as an actor also. And are you enjoying working there in Gabon right now?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it
I
must be
love it. It's
beautiful.
like, the funny part is that because I went away for such a long time, it was the longest time I ever lived in Gabon. Because I lived
Wow.
there when I was like super young, maybe when I was 2 or something, but I don't remember. But this time there was like, I realized like I've never lived in Gabon. I've lived longer in South Africa than in South Korea and South Africa than I've lived in Gabon, and they're not my country. I'm not from there, but still, it was just a great experience, honestly.
Wow. Yeah, it seems beautiful from the photos that you share.
Yeah, it is.
And yeah, I wanted to ask, I remember back in June during the Black Lives Matter protests in the US, you shared a really powerful video about your experience of racism in France specifically, and comparing it to the other countries that you've lived in. It went viral in France, so many people shared it, and I wanted to know, why did you decide to speak up about it, and what was the reaction behind it?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say this. I did not want for it to become viral. Like when it started to become viral, I was like, no, stop it. I thought about deleting it at some point. I was like, oh
Oh,
my God, this is going too far. Like, it- I always saw those viral videos about people, giving testimonies about experiences of whatever, like different topics. And I always thought, whenever I saw that, thousands of likes or thousands of views, I've always thought, oh, it must be like a PR stunt behind it, or probably someone knew someone who shared it like with a journalist. And so that's why they're getting so many views or whatever. I never really thought that it could happen to me, especially on this video. When I did the video, my only objective was to explain to the circle of friends or people I know that I've been to school with, explain what's going on. It was like, for me, like a purely rational and objective point of view, which I thought I could give because I lived in South Africa, I lived in France, and I currently live in the States. I'm mixed race. My father is Black, my mom's white, and I went to study in France. I was like, I think I have an interesting point of view of, I can explain to you what's going on. And because I also felt that from a French point of view, they were looking at the States like, ooh, look at them, those racists, they have the KKK. We're not like that. And I feel like French people have this kind of mindset in regards to the US, where they're like, oh, we're better. Like, we have, our education is better, our medical system is better, everything's better, kind of. And I was like, guys, just want to say that in terms of racism, there's a problem in France. Just want to quickly explain what my experience was and what you guys are doing, and not really you're not really realizing the impact of this. And yeah, it went viral. I got contacted by this big magazine, Psychology
mm,
Magazine, by a journalist who was like, please, like, I'm appalled by what I hear. And I was actually surprised that people were appalled. I think this was the biggest slap for me, is that I thought my experience, everyone would know what I'm talking about. And when I saw the amount of people who were like, what? This is what's going on in France? This is how hurtful our jokes are? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I was like, oh, but I thought it was obvious. And like, it's not obvious. I was like, I'm happy I said it, because I have had a lot of people come to me, like anonymous people that I've never met, who were like, I never knew that my jokes could be so hurtful. I never, thank you for explaining. And I was like, oh, you're welcome, you know.
Yeah, it's crazy because you don't necessarily think that around you there are people who have these kind of views, but then you were powerful enough to touch them and maybe change their minds, which is insane.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's exactly what you said. Like, I think in the video you talked a lot about microaggressions. I'm not sure it's a word here, but it's a
Yeah.
huge part of racism in France, the jokes. That's something that I think is not as accepted in the US, to make racist jokes, basically. To just summarize what I am trying to say is that in France, racism is very powerful because a lot of people don't realize that it's still there.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly. And I exactly talk about this, the fact that the perception of racism is French is a perception that is purely binary. It's
Mm.
either you hate people from who have another skin complexion, or you don't. And if you don't, you cannot be racist. And it's kind of the argument of like, oh, I'm not racist, I have a black friend. It's really this state of mind in France. And I think it's also because their perception of racism, they put it in a comparison with the United States of, look at, they have the
Mm.
KKK and we don't. So they're racist, and they admitted, those people from the KKK admitted, but we're not. I'm not from an like extremist, extremist political view. I don't hate foreigners. I don't hate black people. So I'm not racist, and thus I am allowed to make those jokes. And exactly what I say is that my experience of racism in France was solely through humor only. And me being a comedian, uh, I think that what, and I was just saying it, it's like there's laughing with and there's making fun of. And I think this is the difference we should make when we make those choices. Like, is this person in front of you laughing, or are you making fun of this person? You know, I think that's maybe that might help in terms of understanding the where humor stands, and where, when it's the difference between humor and humiliation, making fun of.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's very insightful of you. And when we've talked before, we also touched on the fact that because America is so big, or for whatever reason, there are crazy extremes. So there's extreme in racism, but also in anti-racism. And it goes with a lot
Yeah,
of topics,
exactly.
women's health and all these things. Whereas in France, what you said, it's more complex. It's less of a big thing that you can see. So I guess that's also why it's not being solved as much.
Yeah, and it's also because we don't have terrorizing things happening, just like, or very few. We have recently the um, Traoré problem, and I
Mm.
forgot her name. It was on the cover in New York Times. But like in the States, you have a lot of police brutality events, and whenever that happens, it sparks a debate in the country, and we have less of those, more now in France. But it's also why the topic comes up often in the States. It's like whenever something happens, they're like, we need to talk about it, of what happened, etc. And in France, we have less of those. I remember the journalist from Psychology magazine was like, are you scared of the police in France? Have you had any encounters? And I was like, I've never seen the police in France. Like, I can't even answer this question because I've never seen them. Or I see them in their cars, but I was never arrested, and nothing ever happened to me. So I can't talk about this. You need to ask someone else. It's not my experience, and I lived in France for 10 years. So, I don't know.
I see. And maybe it can be anything, but are there any topics that you want to talk about in your screenwriting? It doesn't have to be about that, obviously, but is there any specific topics that inspire you?
The things, first of all, in terms of characters, I like strong female characters because, again, as a female screenwriter, you know, it's always very annoying to see those movies with those female characters clearly written by males because they're always so fragile and they always need someone's help and they need to be saved, and they're always in the background helping a guy. And this is the contrary, like exactly what I'm not and what my friends are not. When I look at my friends, I'm like, who's this girl? I've never, of course, probably there's a lot of them, but I don't feel like it represents all of us. So I'm really into writing female characters that are, I'm not going to say strong, that are just what I see, more complex. The complex, and again, it's what's interesting is that I think a critique would look at something I read and be like, oh, her character is complex and she's a strong female, and I would describe my character as like, oh, she's a woman.
Mm.
My
Yeah, because
character is not complex. It's your characters that you guys are writing, they're like plain boring and so simple, but mine is just a woman. Every woman you meet is complex, but you
I love
decide.
the
Yeah.
Sorry. No, I mean, I love the concept of the manic pixie dream girl. I think it's an American phrase to say, like this basic girl who's always happy and simple and just the ideal dream girl to a lot of guys. And obviously, I'm sure like it's evolving a bit, but and also I can't help myself but sort of look at, when I watch a movie, wonder if they pass the Bechdel test. And it's insane the amount of movies that don't. So yeah, I see what you mean. Like it seems complex for other people, for people who don't like who write characters in a simplistic way. But for you, it's just the reality. So
yeah, and I think also all male characters are complex. The male characters are always complex. They always have this very structured, perfectly written backstory, biography. There is so many things are going on, and then you just have this pretty girl who's just crying all the time. And I'm like, the amount of time, if you spend the same amount of time on building your male character as you do on building your female character, then we wouldn't be there. It's just that you focus on the male character because you're a male screenwriter, and thus you can't help but project yourself and the complexity of your character into this, and the woman is like, well.
Is there any specific characters that you love that have been written recently?
I love the lead actress in Queen's Gambit, talking about complex female characters, or just what a female character should look like. She's the perfect embodiment of it. And the character, the person who plays her mom in it, it's also perfectly written. Because what I love about female characters is that we have on our shoulders so many things that men don't have. It's like when you're born a woman, you're not only born a woman, you're born, like in the eyes of society, a future mom. It's like a woman's destiny in every society is to become a mom. A man's destiny is just to do whatever the fuck he wants. Sorry, but it's just no pressure. Oh well, yes, professional achievements just like women have nowadays, but there is in the character in Queen's Gambit, the one who plays the mom, in terms of complexity, now I can say that she's complex, more complex than women you see every day. And it's perfectly written because she's a mom, but she has also her demons challenging her, and the pressure of society, and her relationship with her husband, and her relationship with her daughter. And yeah, I absolutely love this character. I'd say even more than the lead actress who plays the chess player. I think also because I'm a mom, and I saw her and I was like, oh, it's really interesting that you present to us this mom who's not perfect, yet we love her, which I think is difficult because I think that in our collective unconscious, a mom is supposed to be perfect. She's supposed to be loving. She's supposed to be nice. She can get mad or just a little bit, and she's cooking this and that and that. And in Queen's Gambit, the mom, she's not like this, but she's still loving. And
Mm.
yeah, really, really great character.
Wow, that's so interesting. And I really resonate with what you said on expectations put on females. And I heard this woman the other day mention that as a woman, you can either try and meet the standards of the patriarchy or fight them. And both of those roles are super exhausting. So
Yes.
you're just meant to be exhausted as a woman.
Yes,
I don't
exactly.
know. Right.
I,
Cool.
I so agree with you. It's like I'm in the mindset now where I've stopped trying to meet the standards and I'm making my own. Because even when I was trying to meet the standards, it wasn't enough. There's always something that's going to be a problem because I think it's also part of the how the machine works. It's like if you tell women that if they do this, they're perfect, then they're never exhausted, whereas a woman who's exhausted trying to meet standards can never stop and be like, but what do I really want, or what do I, if you're constantly running after something, then you never stop and look around and are like, who am I doing this for again? Why are the men not running? Why are the fathers not running? Not what's going on? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I wish I could ask you so many more questions because there seems like there are a lot of topics that we could chat about, but I've been taking your time for a while now, so I'll just end with a question that I love asking creative people. Are you creatively fulfilled right now, like today, this week?
Yes, I am. Like finally, especially because I've come to the understanding that um, my creativity and the way I show to the world is not just about making money or having like outside of achievement. I feel like when I became an actress and screenwriter, I went back into the whole capitalistic pattern of you're an actress if you play your role in a movie that people know about. You're a screenwriter if you've written a script that people have seen on screen. And that's not, I'm creative. I don't need to make money out of it. I write poetry. I'm not trying to sell them. It's just, I write, I draw now, I draw things and they're very horrible, but I don't care. It's just that my creativity is coming out and I'm letting you know what I mean. But I feel like there's always this question people ask you, like, why are you doing this? Always like in a productive, capitalistic mindset of if you're writing this, it's because you need to sell it. Oh, you're writing poetry, or you're going to try to make a book and put it on Amazon. It's like, no, I'm writing poetry because I like poetry and I like writing it, and it's just here on my my desk, and it has no use, no materialistic use. The only use is for it to make me happy, that's it. So yeah, I'm fulfilled.
I'm so glad to hear this. And yeah, it's really great that you've achieved this level of, like just feeling fulfilled by just doing things. I'm so glad that we got to talk. Thank you so much again. And where can we follow you
And
on
thank you for
social
having
media?
me.
Of course.
So for me, it's mostly Instagram, Olivia Biffot at Olivia Biffot. And then there's my website, but I definitely need to update it. I haven't updated it yet. So, but I'd say Instagram is where you get the news, most accurate news regarding
And that's where,
whatever's going on in my life.
yeah, and that's where we can find
On
the big project that you've been working on. I can't wait.
everything that's happening and everything, if ever I have a news to share, it's going to happen on Instagram.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day and looking forward to seeing more of your projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.